He has left the red and blue political race and is now the presidential nominee for the Libertarian Party. Gary Johnson joins me now from New Mexico. Hey there, Governor. Good to see you again. I guess let's start with a check on how it's going for you and what you're seeing and hearing out there on the campaign.
Well, look, I'm the only candidate that's offering a difference as opposed to Obama and Romney. I'm going to declare peace as President of the United States, if elected President of the United States. I'm going to get out of Afghanistan. I'm going to bring the troops home. I'm the only candidate of the three that wants to balance the federal budget now. That means reforming entitlements now. I'd like to see marriage equality. I'd like to see the Patriot Act repealed. I'd like to see us end the war on drugs. I think there's a real viable third choice here, and I happen to be it as the Libertarian nominee for president.
And Governor Johnson, I do want to go into detail about a few of those things that you mentioned. Certainly quite a few issues that you're focusing on that really aren't being talked about by some of the other candidates, certainly by the mainstream media. But I want to ask you really quick, you have vowed to continue the Ron Paul revolution. You've always been vocal about your support for Dr. Paul. What does continuing this revolution entail?
Well, I'll say it like Ron Paul said it 3 weeks ago. He said, look, I'm not going to get out of the race because the people that are coming out to see me are growing in numbers. There's more people that are coming this direction, the whole notion of libertarian leaning, libertarian. I have the same phenomenon. The more people I talk to, the more support that I get. The trend line is absolutely up. And it stems from a basis in philosophy. I think the majority of Americans are fiscally responsible and socially tolerant. I'm in that category. I think the majority of Americans are. I think the majority of Americans want to get out of Afghanistan now, bring the troops home. I think the majority of Americans understand that our budget is not sustainable, that borrowing and printing money to the tune of 43 cents out of every dollar is going to lead to the collapse of this country, a monetary collapse. So there is a real viable third choice, and that third choice happens to have more executive experience than the other two candidates combined. I'm talking about governmental executive experience. This is not a handicapped choice to vote for Gary Johnson as the Libertarian nominee for president.
And yet, and we can blame this on this history of, the two-party political system that we have, or a whole host of other things, but we really haven't seen too much of you in the mainstream media throughout this campaign. But you did, I want to remind our viewers, you did make it on the invite list for one of the Republican debates. And I just want to play a quick highlight.
Governor Johnson. My next-door neighbor's two dogs have created more shovel-ready jobs than this current administration.
All right, certainly winning over some of the people at that debate. You were talking about the economy, about the need to balance the budget, Governor Johnson. The economy does seem to be one of the top issues. Of course, this week, sort of the issue du jour is, private equity. What conversation needs to be had in this campaign that is not being had regarding the economy?
Well, I am advocating throwing out the entire federal tax system, abolish the IRS, abolish income tax, abolish corporate tax, and replace it with one federal tax, a consumption tax, in this case, the fair tax. I think it reboots the American economy for the next 100 years in a zero corporate tax rate environment. If the private sector doesn't create tens of millions of jobs, I don't know what it's going to take to do that. It ends up being cost neutral. So it's really the answer when it comes to American exports, making American exports 23% more competitive. It's the answer to China.
I want to talk to you about some of the other issues that you mentioned earlier that you have strong feelings about. And one of them that you've spoken about here on RT before, it's the stop and frisk program. Last week we saw the New York Police Department agree to make some changes to that controversial program. Essentially, before they stopped everyone they wanted to, that they found suspect, and they frisked them. Last year that was about 600,000 people. And a great majority of them were Black or Hispanic. Now, changes that they are going to implement, they include a new training video, they include information cards for police officers to, better explain who they should and should not be stopping. You have spoken out about this time and time again. Do you think that this step was at least a step in the right direction for the NYPD?
Absolutely. And then let's get back to the choices now running for president of the United States. Obama, Romney, they don't want to repeal the Patriot Act. I want to repeal the Patriot Act. Let's stop detaining individuals without charging individuals. That's U.S. citizens, and that's those foreigners that are also being held. President Obama signed the National Defense Authorization Act, allowing for the detainment without being charged of U.S. citizens. Look, we fought wars over these issues, and yet things are getting worse. They're not getting better. As President of the United States, if no laws change, I guarantee you that TSA will be as safe and less intrusive within a week of my taking office.
But regarding stop and frisk, as I was asking about, I mean, do you think that this video and a couple cards are going to really change things there in New York City, where this is a huge problem in terms of racial profiling?
Well, it is racial profiling, and no, it's not going to really, I mean, are they going to do it a little bit better? I don't understand. It's an order from on top, which is allowing for this to occur. The order from on top needs to go away. Look, there's reasonable suspicion, and then there's stop and frisk for no reason whatsoever. And this is stop and frisk for no reason whatsoever.
Let's talk about a few more things. I think, Governor Johnson, it was Richard Nixon in the 70s that first declared the so-called war on drugs. I know you've been pretty adamant that this war on drugs need to end. What do you think has gone wrong here? I mean, literally in the last 4 decades, this has been going on.
Well, it's like stop and frisk. We're arresting 1.8 million people a year in this country on drug-related crime. And to what end? Well, we now have 2.3 million people behind bars in this country, the highest incarceration rate of any country in the world. Let's legalize marijuana, control it, regulate it, tax it. Look at the issues surrounding border violence with Mexico. 40,000 deaths south of the border over the last 4 years. These are disputes that are being played out with guns rather than in the courts. This is a prohibition phenomenon. Did we not learn anything during Prohibition? I was just watching the Ken Burns special the other day. Somebody on that special said, look, if we want people to brush their teeth in this country, let's just make it against the law to own a toothbrush or toothpaste and watch how many people actually go out and start brushing their teeth rigorously for the first times in their life.
Would be a good experiment. One more issue that I just want to get your take on, make sure everyone watching has the opportunity to hear your stance. You mentioned at the beginning of this interview gay marriage. I know, though, for the most part, you favor the idea of states making rules for themselves. Last week we heard President Obama come out in support for same-sex marriage, but he says he'll leave it up to the states. Good decision?
Well, first of all, I am states' rights, period. That's in the Constitution. But also in the Constitution, I believe, are constitutionally guaranteed rights to for those that want to have marriage equality, for those gays that want to marry one another, that this is a constitutional right. And so using as an example civil rights in the 60s. Look, if the federal government would have left civil rights to the states in the 60s, would we still have segregated public bathrooms in some states in the South? I think perhaps that we might. So federal government has a constitutional or has a mandate to govern under strict adherence to the U.S. Constitution. I think marriage equality is a constitutionally guaranteed right that the federal government needs to apply.
All right, Gary Johnson, presidential nominee for the Libertarian Party, also former governor of New Mexico. Thanks for coming on the show today.